In today's video we will talk about a Russian astronaut called Yuri Gagarin, the first person in space. Let's start. The year is 1934 and a boy called Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin was born in a village named Klushino near Moscow. His parents worked on a collective farm, Alexey Ivanovich Gagarin as a carpenter and Anna Timofeyevna Gagarina as a dairy farmer. Yuri was the third of 4 children. His older brother Valentin was born in 1924, and by the time Yuri was born he was already helping with the cattle on the farm. His sister Zoya, born in 1927, helped take care of Yura and their youngest brother Boris, born in 1936. Like millions of Soviet Union citizens, his family suffered during the Nazi occupation during World War II. During the German advance on Moscow, retreating Red Army soldiers seized the collective farm's livestock. The Nazis captured Klushino on October 18, 1941. On their first day in the village, they burned down the school, ending Yuri's first year of education. The Nazis also burned down 27 houses in the village and forced the residents, including the Gagarins, to work the farms to feed the occupying soldiers. Those who refused were beaten or sent to the concentration camp set up at Gzatsk. A German officer took over the Gagarin residence. On the land behind their house, the family was allowed to build a mud hut measuring approximately 3 by 3 meters, where they spent 21 months until the end of the occupation. During this period, Yuri became a saboteur, especially after one of the German soldiers, who the children called the Devil, tried to hang his younger brother Boris on an apple tree using the boy's scarf. In retaliation, Yuri sabotaged the soldiers' work. He poured soil into the tank batteries gathered to be recharged and randomly mixed the different chemical supplies intended for the task. In early 1943, his 2 older siblings were deported by the Germans to Poland for slave labor. They escaped and were found by Soviet soldiers who conscripted them into helping with the war effort. They did not return home until after the war, in 1945. The rest of the Gagarin family believed the 2 older children were dead, and Yuri became ill with grief and hunger. He was also beaten for refusing to work for the German forces and spent the remainder of the war at a hospital as a patient and later as an orderly. His mother was hospitalized during the same period after a German soldier gashed her leg with a scythe. When the Germans were routed out of Klushino on March 9, 1944, Yuri helped the Red Army find mines buried in the roads by the fleeing German army. In 1946, the family moved to Gzatsk, where Gagarin continued his education. Yuri and Boris were enrolled at a crude school built in the town and run by a young woman who volunteered to be the teacher. They learned to read using a discarded Soviet military manual. A former Soviet airman later joined the school to teach maths and science, Yuri's favorite subjects. Yuri was also part of a group of children that built model aeroplanes. He was fascinated with aircraft from a young age, and his interest in aeroplanes was energized after a Yakovlev fighter plane crash landed in Klushino during the war. In 1950, aged 16, Gagarin began an apprenticeship as a foundryman at a steel plant in Lyubertsy, near Moscow, and enrolled at a local young workers' school for 7th grade evening classes. After graduating in 1951 from both the 7th grade and the vocational school with honors in mold making and foundry work, he was selected for further training at the Industrial Technical School in Saratov, where he studied tractors. While in Saratov, Gagarin volunteered at a local flying club for weekend training as a Soviet air cadet, where he trained to fly a biplane, and later a Yakovlev Yak-18. He earned extra money as a part-time dock laborer on the Volga River. In 1955, Gagarin was accepted to the 1st Kalovsky Higher Air Force Pilots School in Orenburg. He initially began training on the Yak-18, already familiar to him, and later graduated to training on the MiG-15 in February 1956. Gagarin twice struggled to land the 2-seater trainer aircraft, and risked dismissal from pilot training. However, the commander of the regiment decided to give him another chance at landing. Gagarin's flight instructor gave him a cushion to sit on, which improved his view from the cockpit, and he landed successfully. Having completed his evaluation in a trainer aircraft, Gagarin began flying solo in 1957. On November of 1957, Gagarin was commissioned a lieutenant in the Soviet Air Forces, having accumulated 166 hours and 47 minutes of flight time. He graduated from flight school the next day and was posted to the Luostari Air Base close to the Norwegian border in Murmansk Oblast for a 2-year assignment with the Northern Fleet. On July of 1959, he was rated military pilot 3rd class. After expressing interest in space exploration following the launch of Luna 3 on October 6, 1959, his recommendation to the Soviet space program was endorsed and forwarded by Lieutenant Colonel Babushkin. By this point, he had accumulated 265 hours of flight time. Gagarin was promoted to the rank of senior lieutenant on November of 1959, 3 weeks after he was interviewed by a medical commission for qualification to the space program. Gagarin's selection for the Vostok program was overseen by the Central Flight Medical Commission led by Major General Konstantin Fyodorovich Borodin of the Soviet Army Medical Service. He underwent physical and psychological testing conducted at Central Aviation Scientific Research Hospital in Moscow, commanded by Colonel A.S. Uzanov, a member of the commission. The commission also included Colonel Yevgeny Anatolyevich Karpov, who later commanded the training center, Colonel Vladimir Ivanovich Yazdovsky, the head physician for Gagarin's flight, and Major General Alexander Nikolaevich Babychuk, a physician flag officer on the Soviet Air Force General Staff to the Commander-in-Chief of the Air Force. The commission limited their selection to pilots between 25 and 30 years old. The chief engineer of the program, Sergei Korolev, also specified that candidates, to fit in the limited space in the Vostok capsule, should weigh less than 72 kilograms, 159 pounds, and be no taller than 1.70 meters, 5 feet 7 inches. Gagarin was 1.57 meters, 5 feet 2 inches, tall. From a pool of 154 qualified pilots shortlisted by their Air Force units, the military physicians chose 29 cosmonaut candidates, of which 20 were approved by the Credential Committee of the Soviet government. The first 12, including Gagarin, were approved on March 7, 1960, and 8 more were added in a series of subsequent orders issued until June. Gagarin began training at the Kodinka airfield in central Moscow on March 15, 1960. The training regimen involved vigorous and repetitive physical exercises which Alexei Leonov, a member of the initial group of 12, described as akin to training for the Olympic Games. In April 1960, they began parachute training in Saratov Oblast and each completed about 40 to 50 jumps from both low and high altitude, over both land and water. Gagarin was a candidate favored by his peers. When they were asked to vote anonymously for a candidate besides themselves they would like to be the first to fly, all but 3 chose Gagarin. One of these candidates, Yevgeny Krunov, believed that Gagarin was very focused and was demanding of himself and others when necessary. On May 30, 1960, Gagarin was further selected for an accelerated training group, known as the Vanguard 6 or Sochi 6, from which the first cosmonauts of the Vostok program would be chosen. The other members of the group were Anatoly Kardashov, Andrian Nikolaev, Pavel Popovich, German Tidov, and Valentin Varlamov. However, Kardashov and Varlamov were injured and replaced by Krunov and Grigory Nelyubov. As several of the candidates selected for the program, including Gagarin, did not have higher education degrees, they were enrolled into a correspondence course program at the Zhukovsky Air Force Engineering Academy. Gagarin enrolled in the program in September 1960 and did not earn his specialist diploma until early 1968. Gagarin was also subjected to experiments that were designed to test physical and psychological endurance, including oxygen starvation tests in which the cosmonauts were locked in an isolation chamber and the air slowly pumped out. He also trained for the upcoming flight by experiencing G-forces in a centrifuge. Psychological tests included placing the candidates in an anechoic chamber in complete isolation. Gagarin was in the chamber on July 26, August 5. In August 1960, a Soviet Air Force doctor evaluated his personality as follows: modest, embarrasses when his humor gets a little too racy, high degree of intellectual development evident in Yuri, fantastic memory, distinguishes himself from his colleagues by his sharp and far-ranging sense of attention to his surroundings, a well-developed imagination, quick reactions, persevering, prepares himself painstakingly for his activities and training exercises, handles celestial mechanics, and Mathematical formulae with ease as well as excels in higher mathematics, does not feel constrained when he has to defend his point of view if he considers himself right, appears that he understands life better than a lot of his friends. The Vanguard 6 were given the title of pilot cosmonaut in January 1961 and entered a two-day examination conducted by a special interdepartmental commission led by Lieutenant General Nikolai Kamenin, the overseer of the Vostok program. The commission was tasked with ranking the candidates based on their mission readiness for the first human Vostok mission. On January 17, they were tested in a simulator at the M. Gromov Flight Research Institute on a full-size mock-up of the Vostok capsule. Gagarin, Nikolaev, Popovich, and Titov all received excellent marks on the first day of testing, in which they were required to describe the various phases of the mission, followed by questions from the commission. On the second day, they were given a written examination, following which the special commission ranked Gagarin as the best candidate for the first mission. He and the next two highest-ranked cosmonauts, Titov and Nelyubov, were sent to Tyuratam for final preparations. Gagarin and Titov were selected to train in the flight-ready spacecraft on April 7. Historian Asif Azam Siddiqui writes of the final selection. In the end, at the State Commission meeting on April 8, Kamenin stood up and formally nominated Gagarin as the primary pilot and Titov as his backup. Without much discussion, the commission approved the proposal and moved on to other last-minute logistical issues. It was assumed that in the event Gagarin developed health problems prior to liftoff, Titov would take his place, with Nelyubov acting as his backup. Gagarin's flight was a triumph for the Soviet space program, and he became a national hero of the Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc, as well as a worldwide celebrity. Newspapers around the globe published his biography and details of his flight. He was escorted in a long motorcade of high-ranking officials through the streets of Moscow to the Kremlin, where, in a lavish ceremony, Nikita Khrushchev awarded him the title Hero of the Soviet Union.
Pilot, whom the Russians have deified as the man of the century, arrives at the airport outside of Moscow for his first public appearance. Questions that have arisen in the West about the validity of his flight have no place here today, as the crowds go wild over the first man to conquer space. Major Gagarin's initial function is a long red-carpeted walk to the platform, where Khrushchev greets him. Gagarin puts party first by thanking the communists for the opportunity. Khrushchev interrupts with a Russian bear hug and kiss as Yuri's pictures are waved. There have been grumblings in Russia about the cost of the space program, but that is forgotten today, as tens of thousands pour into Red Square to get a glimpse of their hero. He stands atop Lenin's tomb and receives their accolades. There have been many unanswered questions about the flight, but there's no question of who is #1 man in Russia today.
Other cities in the Soviet Union also held mass demonstrations, the scale of which were second only to the World War II victory parades. Gagarin gained a reputation as an adept public figure and was noted for his charismatic smile. On April 15, 1961, accompanied by officials from the Soviet Academy of Sciences, he answered questions at a press conference in Moscow reportedly attended by 1,000 reporters. Gagarin visited the United Kingdom 3 months after the Vostok 1 mission, going to London and Manchester. While in Manchester, despite heavy rain, he refused an umbrella, insisted that the roof of the convertible car he was riding in remain open, and stood so the cheering crowds could see him. Gagarin toured widely abroad, accepting the invitation of about 30 countries in the years following his flight. In just the first 4 months, he also went to Brazil, Bulgaria, Canada, Cuba, Czechoslovakia, Finland, Hungary, and Iceland. Because of his popularity, U.S. President John F. Kennedy barred Gagarin from visiting the United States. In 1962, Gagarin began serving as a deputy to the Soviet of the Union, and was elected to the Central Committee of the Young Communist League. He later returned to Star City, the cosmonaut facility, where he spent several years working on designs for a reusable spacecraft. He became a lieutenant colonel of the Soviet Air Forces on June 12, 1962, and received the rank of colonel on November 6, 1963. On December 20, Gagarin became deputy training director of the cosmonaut training facility. Soviet officials, including Kamenin, tried to keep Gagarin away from any flights, being worried about losing their hero in an accident, noting that he was too dear to mankind to risk his life for the sake of an ordinary spaceflight. Kamenin was also concerned by Gagarin's drinking and believed the sudden rise to fame had taken its toll on the cosmonaut. On March 27, 1968, while on a routine training flight from Khalovsky Air Base, Gagarin and flight instructor Vladimir Seryozhin died when their MiG-15 UTI crashed near the town of Kirzhak. The bodies of Gagarin and Seryozhin were cremated and their ashes interred in the walls of the Kremlin. Wrapped in secrecy, the cause of the crash that killed Gagarin is uncertain and became the subject of several theories, including several conspiracy theories. At least 3 investigations into the crash were conducted separately by the Air Force, official government commissions, and the KGB. According to a biography of Gagarin by Jamie Doran and Piers Bizany, Starman, The Truth Behind the Legend of Yuri Gagarin, the KGB worked not just alongside the Air Force and the official commission members but against them. The KGB's report, declassified in March 2003, dismissed various conspiracy theories and instead indicated the actions of airbase personnel contributed to the crash. The report states that an air traffic controller provided Gagarin with outdated weather information and that by the time of his flight, conditions had deteriorated significantly. Ground crew also left external fuel tanks attached to the aircraft. Gagarin's planned flight activities needed clear weather and no outboard tanks. The investigation concluded Gagarin's aircraft entered a spin either due to a bird strike or because of a sudden move to avoid another aircraft. Because of the out-of-date weather report, the crew believed their altitude was higher than it was and could not react properly to bring the MiG-15 out of its spin. Another theory, advanced in 2005 by the original crash investigator, hypothesizes that a cabin air vent was accidentally left open by the crew or the previous pilot, leading to oxygen deprivation and leaving the crew incapable of controlling the aircraft. A similar theory, published in Air and Space magazine, is that the crew detected the open vent and followed procedure by executing a rapid dive to a lower altitude. This dive caused them to lose consciousness and crash. On April 12, 2007, the Kremlin vetoed a new investigation into the death of Gagarin. Government officials said they saw no reason to begin a new investigation. In April 2011, documents from a 1968 commission set up by the Central Committee of the Communist Party to investigate the accident were declassified. The documents revealed that the commission's original conclusion was that Gagarin or Seryozhin had maneuvered sharply, either to avoid a weather balloon or to avoid entry into the upper limit of the first layer of cloud cover, leading the jet into a supercritical flight regime and to its stalling in complex meteorological conditions. Gagarin's flight lasted only 108 minutes, but it was enough to establish the Soviet Union as a leading power in the field of space exploration. The successful mission provided valuable information about the conditions in space and paved the way for further manned spaceflights. This information helped scientists understand the nature of the universe and how it operates, making Gagarin an important figure in the history of astronomy. In addition to his historical flight, Gagarin also made important contributions to the study of celestial bodies. He conducted several experiments in space, including observations of the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun, which helped astronomers understand the formation and evolution of these celestial bodies. Gagarin's observations also helped scientists determine the effects of space on human physiology, which was crucial information for future manned missions to the Moon and beyond. Gagarin's impact on astronomy extends beyond his own accomplishments. He inspired a new generation of scientists and space enthusiasts, and his legacy continues to inspire people to pursue careers in the field of space exploration. The Yuri Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center, named in his honor, continues to train astronauts and cosmonauts from around the world, furthering the legacy of Gagarin's contributions to astronomy. Gagarin's legacy continues to inspire future generations of scientists and space enthusiasts, making him a true pioneer in the field of astronomy. Well, that's the video for today. I hope everyone liked the content, and don't forget to subscribe and like this video. See you next time.